What's up, guys? It's Kesn. We are back. We're going to be talking about warrior aggro weapons in this guide. It's going to be a list of all of the just aggro weapons that warriors can get for each expansion, up to Omens of War. I wasn't able to find like a really comprehensive one, so I made one myself. So there's going to be a few different categories of procs you're looking for when you're considering warrior weapons. Number one is going to be a hate aggro proc. This is always going to be your best hate generation. No matter what, this is the best type of proc you can have on a weapon. Number two is going to be a stun and direct damage proc. It's the stun portion that gives you the high amount of threat. The direct damage, some of the stuns, most of the stun weapons also have a direct damage component on it, but it's the stun you're mainly looking for here. Number three is, some people don't know this, but AC debuffs are actually pretty decent hate generators. So you can look for something with an AC debuff on it. Fourth are runes. Runes used to be a lot stronger like 6 or 7 years ago, but it seems like either they broke them or maybe they like ninja nerfed them, and they just don't give as much aggro as they used to, but they do still give some. So if you want to get something with a rune proc, you can pick that up. But player casted runes do not seem to be affected by this. So for example, an enchanter rune will still give a ton of hate threat. So you can get runes, and then lastly, if you can't find anything else, you can get something with like a direct damage or a damage over time on it, and it's better than nothing. Just another couple other quick notes on warrior aggro is two-handers generally are not as good aggro as one-handers in most cases, but that's not always the case. Sometimes a two-hander can be better hate generation. Also, look at the actual ratio of the weapon. If you have like a Lucklin weapon versus a Kunark weapon, the odds are that Lucklin weapon is going to be better aggro regardless of what procs are on them. Now the exception to that might be like the Kunark, the warrior epic might be better than some of the Lucklin weapons. But if you have like some crappy Charduk stun proc versus a Lucklin weapon with a lot better ratio but doesn't have a proc on it, it could be better aggro than the Kunark weapon. An extremely important thing to know is there are stun proc augments that you can buy in classic Everquest, and they're called Wolfenite augments, and you can buy them from any starting city. There's a vendor that sells them, and there's one for every 10 levels or so. You can just buy them straight out for platinum, and these are the best things that you're going to be able to augment into your weapons until Eldon comes out, when the hate augment procs get released. So moving on to the actual list, this is all the best ones that I could find. There's probably some I missed because there's so many weapons in the game. But I'm just going to go down these by expansion, and I don't want to get into every single weapon because this is going to make the video long and boring. I'm just going to give a brief overview of each expansion. You kind of just figure out what works best for you. Starting at Classic, there's really not a whole lot of options here. This Dagas is really good because the stats on it are so good, and you just don't have a lot of aggro options. So this is going to be a really good one. And also Short Sword of the Yekisha is a really popular one because it's fairly common. It doesn't cost a whole lot eventually. And once a whole bunch of them get circulated into the economy, it's got a nice stun proc on it, so getting 2 of these, it's not lower, so you can get 2 of them. So this is a good option here. Then I threw some lower level stuff in here. I threw a two-hander in here if you want to get a two-hander. Once you move on to Kunark, there's all kinds of options. It gets a lot better. Generally, just get your epic. It's the best thing you can do. It looks really cool, and everyone knows how to do it. Everyone knows what it is. Other than that, there's some stun proc weapons. If you raid from Vishan's Peak, there's like 4 of them here. And as an alternative, you can get Sword of the Shisar, just to give you a damage and a damage over time. For group weapons, there's all kinds of stun stuff here as well. You can get Ivy Shade Blade, which is the quest. This is really nice. And if you're an Ixar, you can get Pride of the Legion. And this goes in your primary only, but it also can go in your back, which is pretty cool, and it's got good stats there. Other than that, there's just a bunch of stun procs, and there's also 2 snare weapons you can pick up. I don't know how good these are in terms of aggro, but after Kunark, it doesn't matter anyway, because you're going to have so many options that these are just going to become irrelevant after Kunark's out. And also you can get Wormslayer. Now this doesn't have a proc on it, but you can put a augment in it. And it has a really good ratio. It's a nice big slow weapon, so I would recommend getting Wormslayer if you can. It's got 25 damage, 40 delay. Moving on to Scars of Vilius, who have even more options, but they're going to be kind of rare, and they're mostly focused on raid gear because Vilius is kind of a rating expansion. There was no level increase between Kunark and Scars of Vilius, but you can get Blade of Carnage, which is really good. It's going to be your best one. You can get Scepter of Destruction. Now, this is really good too, but it only drops from the Sleeper's Tomb before he gets awakened, so you're not going to have a very big opportunity to pick that up. And there's a couple group ones. Frostbringer is decent if you're in group gear. Club of the Ice Ocean is decent if you're in group gear. It's got an increased chance to proc on it. And other than that, there's like Will Slapper is extremely rare. You can pick up a Wave Crasher if you want. Moving on to Shadows of Lucian, or Luclin Lucent, it gets even better. You can get a Blood Frenzy, which is ridiculously good, and Blasphemous Blade of the Exile is also ridiculously good. These both have an increased chance to proc on them. You get Hate Giver, which is another hate proc, and there's like some other various ones you can get here if you're like lesser geared. There's also a couple two-handers. I wouldn't really recommend two-handers for Aggro and Luclin. If you have nothing or you have a really bad weapon, they're good because the ratio on them is going to be better than something from a couple expansions ago. But if you're able to get like Blood Frenzy, that's just going to blow these out of the water. Planes of Power, which should just be called Plane of Time, to be honest, because that's all anyone ever does in Planes of Power. But you got Dark Blade of the Warlord, which is going to be your best in slot. You got Edge of Eternity is really good. You got 2 Obsidian weapons that will give you increased proc rate. And all these other ones down here. Ethereal Destroyer is actually really good, but not until you max out your H-Dex. If you have a lot of H-Dex, this is actually a pretty decent aggro generator. But if you don't have any H-Dex, don't bother with this one. And then, you just got a couple other options here if you want to pick up any of these. These are kind of like secondary options from the elementals. Two-hand weapons. Blade of War is actually pretty decent, especially if you have an Eldon augment in it. You can get some good threat there. Vanizier is pretty good for threat as well. It's got an ACD buff on it. Stone Edge Warsword, it's just a rune proc, so again, it's just a secondary weapon if you don't have something else. And from the group game, the only thing I could really find that was like worth noting was this Great Blade of the Storms. This comes from Bastion of Thunder. You can pick this up, if you're looking for like a cheaper end upgrade or you don't raid. Lost Dungeons of Norath. These two are really, 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 really important. Get these. This is going to be hate augments that you can put into all your weapons. There's one for type 8 and there's one for type 4. These are good all the way to Omens of War and probably even after that. Gates of Discord. Again, you got one best in slot hate proc weapon here. Brutish Blade of Balance. These other ones, just a bunch of same old thing. More stun augment weapons. More rune weapons. And then there's some two-handers here. Again, this is just kind of optional if you don't have a great weapon. And then Omens of War, you want to get this 2.0 for sure, the Epic 2.0. This thing is so good. Now, at first glance, you notice it doesn't actually have a proc on it. It's got a warn effect that will give you more hate. And it's also got like a clicky on it that increases your health by a little bit. But you'll notice it has 2 sockets. You can put 2 Eldon hate augments on this. So this is a really, really good weapon. This is going to be your best. And the same thing here. For the 1.5, it's got two sockets on it. The ratio on it is not as good as the 2.0, but this is also really good. I would, if you get this, you're probably going to be wearing it until you get your 2.0. And then also, same old thing here. You got some raid 1-handers, you got some raid 2-handers, and also I threw in some group weapons from Omens of War too. This is going to be mostly for if you're not level 70 yet, because some of these are tradable. Some of them aren't, but some of them are, so this is just kind of like, budget options. So that pretty much covers everything. I hope this was helpful. Please make sure to like the video, and see you in the next one. All right, bye.